Good afternoon. This is Critical Talk with Professor Aminah Al-Deen, and I have the pleasure of having with me a teacher. Dr. Harriet Lewis is the founder of I know I'm going to mess this up, Connoisseur Development. She has worked in the research and community and economic development space for over 25 years. She conducts business and tourism research studies and leading organizations that serve women, refugees, youth, and small business owners, including an international volunteer association and a chamber of commerce. Most importantly, she has led teams through staffing, training, and client opportunities that resulted in greater inclusion, big word, strong teams, and increased access to services for marginalized people. In addition, Dr. Lewis is a special advisor for the Inner City Muslim Action Network, is the United Nations representative for the Nigerian NGO New Era Education and Charitable Support Foundation, and also serves as the honorary consul for the Republic of Cabo Verde to the state of Illinois. Asked me if she's busy. And I would like to welcome Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you,
Dr. Lady. Why don't you have bags under your eyes like I do?
Because I use cream.
I want some. Well, this evening, and I would ask our listeners to get a pencil and some paper, because we're going to have a wonderful teaching, kind of a simulation of one of the workshops that Dr. Lewis does on equity. And we're going to do this workshop over 2 days, so that we pump the most out of her that we can get for free. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lewis to tell us, first of all, a little bit about the foundation, and then something about what these trainings consist of. Just a general overview.
Sure. Yeah, Connaissance Development is a social enterprise. It emerged from Connaissance Research, which was founded in 2004. And Connaissance Development focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, and furthering economic development through tourism, research, CSR, corporate social responsibility, training, and NGO capacity building. And so within the CSR space—
Wait a minute.
Yep.
For those of us who are slightly slow, what is an NGO?
Oh, a non-governmental organization. Like in the
United
States,
mean?
It means part of civil society, not a governmental agency, but equivalent to a nonprofit organization in the United States. It's a universal term. Okay. Some organizations within the United States, typically those who have an international presence in the United States, are also referred to as NGOs. Okay. NGOs can be recognized. Some of them are recognized by the United Nations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So now I got a little bit off, but yeah, so what we're doing right now within the corporate social responsibility space is providing diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings. So the corporate social responsibility training that Connaissance Development provides is really to connect corporations to communities domestically and globally. And then specifically as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, some companies may need a little bit more support for their employees, especially right now in this space that the United States is in and that the world is in as it relates to racial equity. And so we provide equity and inclusion training on variety of issues, specifically as it relates to implicit bias, historical antecedents of racism in the United States, case studies on equity. So that's what we provide. And as far as the platforms, right now we're in the space of COVID. And so our training has to be virtual. And so we provide virtual training workshops as well as webinars. We're starting a webinar series. We did one last weekend. We have one coming up this weekend. Last weekend was on encouraging equity. This upcoming weekend is on, it's not on encouraging equity, it's on barriers to equity, implicit bias. And then workshops, we've been able to create a space that simulates a safe space within Zoom. The technology is pretty robust in that you're able to break it out into rooms and create, small teams and small groups where people can feel safe within that space and bring people back to the larger group to process. So that's how we deliver the training within this COVID period on the online platform.
Well, I think that that's just amazing, particularly because there needs to be some order. People need to be able to measure how they're moving along and considering things that perhaps they haven't considered before. But also, even though you're doing small businesses and corporate stuff, all of the stuff that you do sounds like it could be anywhere. It can be in education, it can be in the masjid community for their board. It can be in many spaces. And I would encourage folks to sign up for training. You have nothing to lose. You only get a chance to gain something like I'm getting ready to gain tonight as I get out my pen and paper. So go for it, Dr. Lewis.
Okay, and we talked about this as being a training session, but I was thinking of it more as a conversation. But I will today we're going to focus on a couple of the areas, and I don't have my notes, but we'll go with what we have. But I would like to have a conversation through some of these words. So when we discuss equity at Connaissance Development, okay, there we go. When we talk about equity at Connaissance Development, we utilize an acrostic, and this is our acrostic because oftentimes, we're in the space right now where a lot of organizations, a lot of masajid, corporations, small businesses, individuals are wanting to do something. They're wanting to connect. There are a lot of diversity trainings, a lot of CSR individuals that are connected to companies. A lot of diversity trainers are out there. You hear in the news, you hear on CNN a lot. We must focus on equity now. Corporations must get involved now. And so there's a lot of conversation on diversity in this and diversity in that. But then they talk about, we need to have a more equitable society, and equity is the problem, and we haven't gotten to equity. And that's
let me interrupt you, because for many, equity is the new term. People keep talking about equality.
Right. And equity is a new term. It's getting a resurgence, if you will. Equity started out as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then the focus was diversity and inclusion, and then the focus was diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because it's just challenging. Equity is hard work, and it takes a while for us to get there, because and even though we're talking about it in theory, getting there is going to take a lot of resources, a lot of commitment, and a lot. It would be difficult. I'm going to say a lot of pain, but it would be difficult, and it's going to be, it will be a long-term process, but it's not impossible. And when we talk about equality and equity are two different things. Equality means providing the same opportunity, the same resources, but if you don't start, if you don't have the starting place as another population, you're not going to have the same ending. And so when we're talking about equity, we're talking about removing barriers. We're not talking about providing the same resources. We'll get to those same resources, but we have to remove the barriers so that people can get there. So
I'm ready.
So we're going to go through a few of them today, and we're going to talk about our acrostic, which is written as economics, quantitative, qualitative, uniformity, inclusive, transparent, and youth. And we created this acrostic because people are struggling with defining equity, for one. And then also it's just a nice way for us to talk through equity and how we think about equity and how we can be accountable to equity as we're developing programs in organizations or as individuals. The other reason why Connaissance development focuses on working with corporations, but also with anyone, is because whether it's in a corporation or whether it's a nonprofit organization or Masajid, all of these entities are led by and filled with people. So even though we talk about, corporate America or corporate this or that Masajid there or that church there, these are still people within these organizations who have feelings, who have hearts, who have opinions, who have desires, and all of these things. So it's about connecting to those people. So that's kind of how we approach the work. So scrolling down to economics, and economics is everything. Economics, and when we talk about equity, you can't have equity. The first and last words in the acrostic, in my opinion, are the most important. We'll talk about the second one, which is the why, which is youth tomorrow. But economics is everything. And when we're talking about equity, you can't get to equity without getting to economics. And when, oftentimes in organizations, and maybe some of the listeners here are thinking about their own organization or their own corporation, where they have a diversity and inclusion officer, they have a CSR officer, they have an HR officer that provides diversity trainings, and they've changed their hiring practices to where it's more inclusive, and they have these teams where they talk through diversity, and they provide workshops around cultural sensitivity. And that's those are the progressive ones. Those are the good organizations and the good companies. Because there's still a lot of them, many of them, and I would even bet you say most of them, who don't do that. They don't do that. And there is definitely still a need for diversity and inclusion training.
But do people know, people of color know they're making less?
We see it on the news, but no. There are some organizations and some systems that try to be more transparent. For example, if there's a pay scale at a company where there's a pay scale, and that your particular position is in a particular grade, and there are so many steps. And within that grade and within that step for your position, where there's coordinator, manager, director, VP, CEO, what have you, that there are steps, you can kind of have an idea. It's a little bit more fair when it's like that, because that Susie, even though she looks different or he's different, that if they are within there, if we're both managers, there should not be a significant difference in our salaries. However, most organizations don't have that. And biases enter people's pay scales. I want to, if I want to pay people more, if I feel a connection to them, or if I, can relate to them, or if I think that he is responsible for his family as opposed to she is responsible for her family. Or if she's the sole breadwinner in her family, that's not my fault, and you still, will pay someone else. So yeah, typically people don't know that there's a significant difference. And as you see here, typically in the United States, Black people make 73 cents on the dollar compared to white people. And then when you disaggregate that compared to women, and maybe in another slide or some other slides with the previous, the differentiation between a Black woman and a white male was more like 40%. So there's a 40%. If she's more like 60 cents and he's more like on his dollar for the same position. And so all of these things.
Now you're really kicking me off here.
What'd you say?
You're ticking me off. I gotta go and check my pay stubs.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's fair. And you say, well, what can I do? I mean, this is a conversation that we have to continuously have. We have to, work with leaders. We have to get beyond this, because when you're paying her less, or when you're paying him less, who of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, you're creating, we know this, it's creating less of an opportunity for that person to do more for their family, whether it's providing a higher, a better neighborhood to live in, or better food to eat, better education.
Have disposable income.
Disposable income,
and other things. Yeah.
Disposable income or just even necessary income to buy the tools for education, to buy a computer for my child, or to purchase Wi-Fi for my home. You talk about some of the disparity in income that came out, during the pandemic, and we can talk about that in the next slide. That disparity came out, and a lot of it was income based. Yeah, and so we talk about economics that impacts your housing, everything. Economics is everything. And I know that sounds cliche, but it really is. It is true. So, and we're only going to go through 3 today. So the next word or phrase, I guess words in the acrostic is a quantitative, qualitative, and even though that's 2 words, but really wanted to get to measurement, because if there isn't somebody out there documenting, collecting the data, the right data on the right populations, we can't see the disparities. We can't see the disparities.
Right.
Yeah. We can't see the disparities in housing. We can't see the disparities in health. This particular map graph, it's from NPR. And I like this. Don't pay attention to, it's a map of the United States, more or less, each one. Don't pay too much attention to the location of the states, because they're all the same. I guess these are hexagons. But you can notice on here that Massachusetts is west of Rhode Island, when we know that Massachusetts is north of Rhode Island, and Missouri, and being someone who's originally from Missouri, is north of Kansas, and Missouri is actually east of Kansas. So but more or less, that what we're showing here is the deaths and the cases, the disproportionate effect on African Americans of deaths and cases of COVID in most of the states. And so what I like about this, we know that I don't have the statistics in front of me, but if we say that African Americans make up 10% of or 20% of the population of the state in the state of Illinois, but then we're making up 40% of the COVID cases, and then 60% of the deaths. And so this right here, if you look at the orangish colors to the burnt orange, those reflect the duplication or the multiplication of the COVID cases amongst the African American population, twice as much, 3 times as much. And then in the states with less African Americans, predominantly like South Dakota, Montana, they have less of an incidence of COVID cases and deaths. But I like this because it shows the disparities as it relates to the disproportionate impact of the population within those specific states. And again, what's important more that beyond COVID is just it's important to measure, because if we're not measuring the right data, we won't have the right outcomes. And so we talk about, even when we're talking about medication or other types of procedures, or how we learn, or a lot of things, whether it's physiologically or environmental or cultural, if we're not measuring specifically for a population, we won't see the disparity. Or if we don't understand everything that particular population experiences, for example, the disproportionate and chronic conditions that African Americans and Latinos experience because of environment, and because of, back to that first slide, of lack of disproportionate income levels, we don't understand the inequity well either. And so that's why, in order to get to equity, we have to be measuring. And it has to be a part of any strategy that we're continuously measuring the equity. We can't talk about equity without talking about, data either.
Yeah, and it was particularly difficult to get some data in a pandemic, because people could not go out. And I think this ties in well with the previous slide about economics is everything, because you got to have money to get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have money to even buy all the disinfectants. And in Chicago alone, there's 17,000 houses that don't have running water. And I haven't even moved to the suburbs yet. But you got to have money. You have to have money to eat well, which will probably help some of the comorbidities, with obesity and A1C and hypertension and all of those things. And a, a large segment of our population is just blocked, obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Let me shut up and let you go on.
No, yeah. I can sit there for a minute just thinking about the disparity and the obstacle and obstacle. And I think about economics. And I think about unemployment. And whenever, whether it's the pandemic right now or whether it's the recession of 10 years ago, and United States Americans begin to feel the unemployment pinch or the reduced income,
Right.
a single parent, or the single income in the household or no income in the household, and we're in the double digits of unemployment. But we're talking about communities where it's predominantly African American or African American men as a specific population. We've always been, or this population or that particular neighborhood has always been in the double digits unemployment. 20%, 30%, 40% unemployment.
Always. Let us take a quick break now, and we'll be back.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Okay, moving along.
Okay, that was a quick break.
I'm telling you. I have to talk to my producer about how long he thinks 10 seconds is.
Okay. All right. So the third area, and I believe this is the final area that we'll discuss today, is uniformity. And this is the word that we're using in our acrostic for fair, for just. And at present, justice is not equal. And I decided to reflect two graphs related to mass incarceration, because we can't talk about equity without talking about mass incarceration. If we're talking about racial equity in the United States, we can't discuss equity, racial equity, without talking about mass incarceration, when you have 1 in 3 Black men will encounter the justice system in his lifetime. And compared to white men, 1 in 17. So we have to talk about mass incarceration. So that's a statistic that should surprise anyone and should not be acceptable to anyone. And this is, if we're talking about disparity and everything that comes along with encountering the justice system. And I'm not saying that people who are actually in prison, but just encountering the justice system, having to go to court, having to deal with court, having to deal with the justice system and how that makes you feel and how that affects you and your family. And if you are actually imprisoned and are paroled and trying to return to a normal life, it's challenging. One of the statistics that I came across compared a person, a white male without a criminal record to a black male without a criminal record, a white male with a criminal record, and a black male with a criminal record as they're applying for a job. And so the statistic was a white male without a criminal record has a 43% chance of receiving a callback after applying for a job. A black male without a criminal record has a 16% chance of receiving a callback after applying for a job. Here's where it gets tricky or interesting. A white male with a criminal record has a 17% chance of receiving a callback after applying for a job, and a black male with a criminal record has a 3% chance of receiving a callback, if that, after applying for a job. So the point is, even a white male with a criminal record, a white male with a criminal record has a greater chance of getting a callback for a job than a black male without a criminal record.
Right.
As important is the statistic is that, which is why there are policies. I mean, sometimes we talk about anti-black policies or racist policies or disenfranchising policies. This is why policies such as ban the box is so important, so that no one has to put on their application that they have a criminal record, a felony record, so that they may increase their opportunity for employment, so that they can take care of their families, and then there are other policies. We can talk about housing policies and how housing policies that disenfranchise returning citizens impact families, impact stability, and how this has a negative effect for generations. It creates reduces the opportunity, the possibility of generational wealth, and which is why you continue to have these disparities. And so that's why I say, when we talk about equity, the word that we've been trying to avoid, we need to talk about diversity. We need to talk about inclusion, because implicit bias does play into that. But at the same time, we have to get real about equity, because if we don't get real about equity in all of our spaces, in our masajid, in our companies, in our neighborhoods, in our policies, in our taxes, we're not going to get to a place where we can, see less injustice like we've seen with, the police killings and the constant brutality and things like that, because all of that is tied to our inequitable system and our inequitable resources that exist within our society.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about two things. One, I'm thinking it was in the fall, where the police were called to a school to arrest. She was either in preschool or kindergarten, and they actually arrested her and put her in the back of the patrol car because she was misbehaving in class. Then I was thinking about, goodness, if you go, I don't know, maybe 10 blocks east of me, the gas price is $2.79 a gallon. If I go to a white neighborhood, it's $1.79. So higher prices for necessities, higher prices for food, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, a dozen eggs, higher utility bills, as if the pipe had to get run a little bit longer, so I'm paying for it to get run a little bit longer. And oh my goodness, I can't come out there and put in a meter because. So it's economics all the way around. You're making less, you're paying more for basic necessities, and there's something going on when you have to teach children that young. That girl couldn't have been more than 5, if she was 5, that this is your lot in life. I mean, that shook me. It was on the evening news. Her mother was screaming. The teacher that called the police had nothing to say. She was acting up. And what does that mean? Well, we have to look at, in the inner city, how the school is structured. It's surveillance and conformity. You don't, if you were to compare the lab school, for example, with, I don't know, John Marshall. Now, I don't even know if that's a real name. Elementary school. In one school, the lab school, you see students having the freedom to create, the freedom to talk through ideas. And there's an attitude or philosophy that says we're creating leaders here. In the typical inner city school, we're creating people who know how to be obedient and have a taste of punishment when they're not obedient. And they go home to the economic stuff that you mentioned earlier, where there's nothing.
There is so much that you've said there. And I'm sitting here processing all of that. And when I think about kids in schools who are mistreated, it brings me to tears, but it also makes me angry. But I want to, before going into the school, I was thinking about, even, we talk about neighborhoods and access to quality food or food that, it costs more in these neighborhoods if there is a grocery store. And when there is a grocery store, the quality of the food is different. As someone who was raised in the inner city, in a neighborhood that was working class, poor to working class neighborhood, a lower middle class neighborhood, where there were grocery stores, the quality of the food was different than the grocery stores in the suburbs or in the neighborhoods where there was a higher income, and the diversity of food was different in these schools. I mean, in these grocery stores, and the expiration date was different in the food. So the quality and the variety and all of that was different. But you touched on something that's real, is a school to prison pipeline. It is real. It is very, very real for Black students in this country, and it has been studied. It's been studied in Florida. It's been studied in states around the country, that there is a disparity in how teachers and administrators treat Black students, Black male students and Black female students, and how two students can be doing the same thing, and the Black student will go to the principal's office, or the Black student could just be doing nothing really, and will go to the principal's office at a young age. When you have with this child, this preschool student, which makes me angry and it makes me sad, learning about conformity, feeling like a criminal at a young age at 4, teaching them that they are a criminal at the age of 4, so that they grow up to think, I am bad, I'm a criminal. So when this happens again, it becomes normalized. So you have these children at 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, going to the principal's office, being written up, getting suspended, getting expelled, dropping out of school in 9th grade, 10th grade, because they can't deal with this, or because they missed the school, or because they made, the administrators made them to feel some kind of way. Or I'm happy, I guess, I can say thank God that, in some of these schools that, you know, after the most recent incidences with George Floyd, that they're pulling the police officers out of the schools in many places, because it's not creating a safer environment in many cases. And it's also, again, it's just continuing this like you said, this ability or this environment where kids who should be thriving and learning how to be leaders are learning how to feel like a criminal in the institution, in the school, and learning how to conform and learning how to behave instead of learning how to thrive and to be, when they should be learning how to thrive and to be and to learn.
And the other end of that is, even if they make it through school, you just gave us a bunch of stats. The chances of them getting hired with no criminal record are so dismal that they have to or are pushed to find other ways of making money. And then another whole dark world opens up, which is almost unavoidable because they can't make money legitimately.
Right. And that's where you have this with the second graph. You have 33% of the prison system is made up of Blacks.
Yeah.
When Blacks are, you know, are 12.5 to 13% of the population.
Right.
That makes no sense to me. This is I understand why it happens. You understand why it happens. Most of us, if not all of us, should understand why it is. And we have to get beyond this. This is not, it does not have to be this way. And we do not have to accept this. And we should not be teaching our children to accept this.
But there's a hidden thing there. The holder of the cards is not going to deal equitably because they want to keep holding on to those cards.
Yeah, that's true.
So what do we do?
I'm inspired.
We got to do what we're doing in your presentation is learning where the obstacles are and how they're functioning.
Yeah, we need to learn about our implicit biases. We need to learn about where the obstacles are. We need to learn that when we release a little bit of our resources, we're not going to miss it. We're not going to go broke in the process. We need to learn how to share our resources. But I'm inspired, and we do that in many different ways. Once we're taught that, you know, we can share and we're not going to hurt in the process of sharing, I think we can get to a better place. I'm inspired by this generation. I'm inspired by this generation that's pushing the needle. And I think that we would not be here right now talking about this right now if this generation, you know, were not pushing the needle as hard as they are. My fear, because I've, you know, been around for a couple of decades, my fear is that that this window is small. It is. And then we're going to go back to business as usual, you know, before the COVID pandemic is over.
That's it.
Yeah.
I hate to be praying for a pandemic to last to make a window longer, but I'm going to ask you if you would not stop here because we got a little bit of time and go to the next slide, please.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So we will continue on. The fourth word in the acrostic is inclusive. And this is very obvious, and I guess I would say it's the easiest, but it's not necessarily the easiest, because if it were, we would not still have a need for training around inclusivity and looking at corporations and spaces, faith traditions, and others. Other spaces where there is a diversity of people and not seeing inclusivity. You know, you may be familiar with this adage. It's pretty common when it comes to a way of explaining diversity, inclusion, and equity. You may have heard this before, that diversity is being invited. So we think about diversity, inclusion, and equity, thinking about a dance. or, some type of social event. We say a dance. And diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance, and equity is being asked or being able to pick out the music. And so that's one way of thinking about diversity, inclusion, and equity. Yeah. So, oftentimes in diversity inclusion programs in companies, or even in nonprofit organizations or masajid or churches or neighborhood associations, or any type of group that has been homogeneous for a while, they're looking for that one person or that two person, whether it's gender, whether it's race or ethnic group or other type of diversity, to bring that person in to say, hey, look at us, we have some diversity. And they may include them at the, in the board meeting, or they may include them to be a part of the of whatever they're trying to participate, whatever they're trying to do. But it kind of stops there. It's still limited inclusion. But what we know is statistics have shown when it comes to corporation, diversity is a good thing. And diversity, diversity in thought, diversity in experience, diversity in cultural background makes us stronger as a country, makes us stronger as a community, and also makes businesses stronger. And so this is one thing that we try to share with corporations, and many corporations get it, that when they have a more diverse and inclusive company, that company has the opportunity to generate more revenue, and also because they're connecting with a greater market share as well.
Well, in education, especially at the university, people started to complain. I can be present, but if you ignore what I say, if you ignore my presence, and I never get to sit on an important committee, then what is diversity? Diversity is I have a color. I mean, I have a box of crayon, and they all sit there.
Mm-hmm. You know what? That makes me think of two things. Yes, one, you can't just bring one in, because bringing one in is not enough to really create an inclusive environment. And what I was talking to some people recently about what some of the law firms are doing in the city, and some of the challenges that African-American attorneys have experienced or in law firms, as well as in other types of spaces. You may bring a young attorney into a law firm, and that young attorney, stays within their unit, and they don't have a mentor, or if they have a mentor, they have that one mentor in that one unit. But what has been happening also, another white attorney may come into that law firm, and they have the opportunity, they have sponsors within the law firm, they have others who share them in the different areas of law, and so they're able to excel. And so when it comes to really creating an inclusive environment, specifically to address racial equity, or any other type of equity, whether it's gender equity or what have you, you can't just create a policy that benefits one person or a few people. If you're really trying to create an inclusive environment and shift the culture within the organization or the company or whatever type of entity it is, you have to be intentional in the effort of not just one, several, and then also creating an opportunity for this person to learn and experience so that they can rise to leadership as others. Or if they choose to go to another firm and they go to another firm at a different level, that's fine as well, because you're doing your role as it relates to furthering equity and creating a better society. But, like you mentioned, people aren't thinking like that. They're thinking, let's just mark the box off. We have some diversity here and that's enough. But it's not enough, because what happens is when that person is invited to that board meeting and their voice is not heard and business is as usual, they leave and they start their own. They leave, they start their own business, or they go somewhere else, and they still don't grow, and unless they have the support to grow. And then it's
I'm sorry to barge in, but we have to take a break, and I want to come back to that point.
your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
In many of the masajid community, when you look at the boards, and even because of the protests, folks have scurried around. Let us get a black person. Let us get a Latino person. The culture of the board, however, remains the same. And the person just sits. Probably with time will disappear, which is what is hoped for. But how do we, as a Muslim community who needs your services, repeat that, needs her services, with a mandate of tribes coming to know one another, how do we really, really take this seriously?
Well, we have to educate ourselves. We have to start there. We have to, I'm surprised and not surprised at the same time. We take for granted that people understand our struggle, that people understand our history, or that we understand other people's history. And so we have to start with a basic understanding. And oftentimes we don't. We just kind of, stay in our own silos and with the minimal understanding that we learn somewhere else, either from our family, our community, our community, whether it's in the United States or overseas, or our community that the city that we grew up in. And we stay with those assumptions. And then we sometimes will be in different spaces and it's like, aha, yep, my assumptions, what I was taught was correct because they're doing it. And that's all I need to know. And we stay there and we don't get beyond it. So, in Masajid, we need to take time to really get to know each other on a personal level. And then we also need to take time to really know each other's stories, our struggles. And we also need to do this not just at, during Black History Month, or not just during that particular time of the year or that time of the year. It has to be an ongoing process of learning and understanding how we can build community together and create inclusive spaces. And so beginning with that, understanding our implicit bias, understanding, how it shows up.
You keep using that phrase. What is an implicit bias?
An implicit bias is an unconscious bias that it's generated from our experiences, our experiences, our family, our community, and it's not always negative. It can be negative, it can be positive, but it's how we perceive something without thinking about it. And so typically when we're talking about racial bias as it relates to implicit bias, typically if you're taught in your community, whether you are African American or Jamaican or Bosnian or Indian or what have you, if you're taught that Black people or African Americans specifically are this way, and even though different, you're going to always apply that in that context. If you're taught to fear through media, through TV shows, through things that you've read, through all of the Facebook posts, through all of the Twitter, through everything that you've heard from the beginning, from your mother's womb until now, you're going to have this idea that Black people, and even the darker that you are equated with, this way of being. And then the lighter you are, or people who are close to European, are that way. And there's been a lot of studies, Harvard has this implicit bias test. I like to, when we've done this training, when we do this training, we like to send people to the website to take the implicit bias test. And that particular website does implicit bias on a variety of different areas. And we specifically ask people to take the one related to color and take the one related to race. And it takes people through a series of activities where they are switching it up, where, you know, black is good, light, you know, dark is good, back and forth, you know, to see how you're responding. And more often, people respond to the things and the stereotypes as they've been taught. And so we have to get beyond that. We have to retrain the way that we're thinking, and we have to just understand that we all have biases. We all have biases and things that we've been taught. It's not necessarily bad. It's just, unfortunately, this is how racism has impacted us all. It's created barriers to whereas we can't create human relationship with others that we would like to, because of things that we've been taught. And this is how racism has affected not just, you know, Black people. It's affected white people. It's affected, you know, Latinx population, indigenous population, everyone here, immigrants, refugees. I mean, it's affected all of us in so many different ways, so many different negative ways that we need to get beyond.
Well, you know, it's very interesting because one measure of whether you're a good person or not, especially in the Muslim community, is how much money you have. Wealth determines a great deal. Back to your economic slide. So if you're a person who, you know, through no effort on your part, is making less than the people that you work with, then you will never reach a threshold where you're recognized as successful, because you're always scrabbling. And I've come to hate the word diversity, because I'm saying, well, you know, I got a box of crayon too, you know, and what does that mean? And how are we to activate it when you know, it's the information that arrives first that sticks. So if you're South Asian and you've been worshiping glory, which is whiteness, and it's in your weddings, it's here, it's there, it's you go out and buy the face cream to make yourself lighter because your mama did it, your aunts and uncles did, they even got a brand for men. And when they realized the pushback after Black Lives Matter, they dropped one part of the name. Still same cream, still same culture. And that's the essence of it. And that's why I think this training is so darn important, because we're given an opportunity to dig down deep. And with that, I'm going to give you the last word until we meet again tomorrow.
You know, I guess the last word tonight is, you know, I'm inspired. I'm inspired by the space that we're in right now. I'm inspired that we're having this conversation. I'm inspired that there's so many people who are wanting to do more, but they don't know how to do more.
Yeah.
That we're in the space that we're having this conversation. Yeah. You know, I want to help people move to that next stage. I want to help organizations and Masajid and others move to that next stage. And I'm inspired by where we're at. And, you know, I know that most people want to do better, want to be better, want to share, want to care, want to connect. Yeah, and that's what keeps me going. That's my last word, you know, connection.
This has been Critical Talk with Dr. Harriet Lewis, and we're on a journey here, folks. And part 2 is tomorrow night. Please, please tune in.
Thank you.